The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon on November 27, 2020, casting an amber glow over the quiet countryside outside Tehran. It should have been an ordinary afternoon, but in one stretch of highway near the town of Ubsard, something extraordinary and deadly was about to unfold. A convoy of black vehicles cruised along the road, escorting a car that carried a man Iran had both revered and fiercely protected. His name was Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the alleged father of Iran's nuclear weapons program. He had been warned. Time and again, Israeli intelligence, Iranian defectors, and global experts had all whispered the same thing. He was a target. Fakhrizadeh himself knew he was on borrowed time, but not even he could have predicted the level of precision and sheer audacity that would bring his life to an end. The moment came in a flash. A sudden explosion rocked the road, forcing the convoy to a halt. But this wasn't a traditional roadside bomb. Before his bodyguards could regroup, gunfire erupted not from nearby attackers, but from a remote-controlled machine gun mounted on a parked Nissan truck. Fakhrizadeh's car was riddled with bullets. Within seconds, he was critically wounded. His bodyguards scrambled, but the attackers were nowhere. No agents, no drones in the sky, no visible shooters. Just an abandoned truck, later found riddled with cameras, sensors, and satellite-controlled weaponry, and a man, now dead, who had been living under the shadow of espionage for over a decade. The Iranian government immediately pointed fingers. Their statement was clear: Israel is behind this attack. But while the world echoed with speculation, one question echoed louder than any other: who really killed Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, and why? This wasn't just an assassination. It was a message, a warning, a turning point in a shadow war that had been unfolding for years behind closed doors, encrypted messages, and classified briefings. To understand this assassination, we need to go back, not just weeks or months, but decades. Because Fakhrizadeh's story didn't begin on that highway. It began in the laboratories of Tehran, under fluorescent lights, behind steel doors, where science and secrecy danced a dangerous waltz. In the early 2000s, amid growing global tension over Iran's nuclear ambitions, Western intelligence agencies began to hear a name repeated in intercepted communications and confidential reports: Fakhrizadeh. Unlike other Iranian scientists, Fakhrizadeh wasn't publicly visible. No interviews, no photographs, not even an official biography. Yet his name was whispered in circles that mattered. The IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, repeatedly requested to meet him. Iran refused. Why? Because Fakhrizadeh wasn't just a scientist. He was a commander in the IRGC, Iran's elite Revolutionary Guard Corps, and according to Israeli and American intelligence, he was the man spearheading Project Ahmad, covert Iranian initiative to design and develop nuclear weapons. The existence of Project Ahmad was Iran's deepest secret. For years it was hidden, layered under legitimate civilian research, compartmentalized to prevent leaks, and protected by some of Iran's most loyal operatives. But in 2018, everything changed. That's when Mossad, Israel's feared intelligence agency, pulled off one of the most audacious intelligence coups in modern history. In the heart of Tehran, under the cover of night, a Mossad team infiltrated a warehouse holding Iran's nuclear archives. They didn't just copy files, they stole them, tens of thousands of documents and CDs, and smuggled them out of the country before sunrise. Inside those documents was the smoking gun, diagrams, calculations, correspondence, and orders signed by Fakhrizadeh himself. The evidence was damning. Fakhrizadeh wasn't just involved, he was the mastermind, the architect of Iran's nuclear weapons ambition. And yet, despite the exposure, Iran doubled down. Fakhrizadeh's security was tightened. He moved rarely, spoke to no one outside the inner circle, and remained the nucleus around which Iran's future nuclear deterrent revolved out to Israel. That was unacceptable. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in a televised presentation, held up Fakhrizadeh's name for the world to see. He said, "Remember that name." It was not just a statement, it was a threat. From that moment on, Mossad shifted its operations from surveillance to elimination. But assassinating a man so heavily protected was no simple task. Iranian counterintelligence was ruthless. The IRGC monitored every movement, and Fakhrizadeh himself knew he was a target, avoiding patterns, changing routes, and limiting contact with outsiders. Which is why the attack in 2020 shocked even seasoned intelligence veterans. According to Iranian sources, there were no foreign agents present during the hit. The weapon was AI-assisted using facial recognition, satellite feed, and a 600-round automatic machine gun, all fired remotely from outside the country. Some reports suggest the entire operation was conducted from Tel Aviv, in real time. If true, it marked a new era of warfare, where assassination didn't require boots on the ground. Just satellite control and technological superiority. Iran, furious and humiliated, vowed revenge. Funeral ceremonies portrayed Fakhrizadeh as a martyr. His face appeared on murals, but beneath the public fury, Iranian officials were asking their own questions. How deep was the breach? How much had Mossad penetrated our system? And worst of all, who had helped them from the inside? because assassinations like this don't happen in a vacuum. They require intelligence, surveillance, local assistance. And if Mossad pulled this off, it meant they had operatives or collaborators within the very heart of Iran's security apparatus. For Israel, the message was simple: we can reach anyone, anywhere. Not even your most protected man is safe. For the United States, it was a dilemma. The assassination came at a delicate moment, as President-elect Joe Biden was preparing to re-enter nuclear talks with Iran. The strike risked derailing diplomacy before it even began. And for Iran, it was a devastating loss. Not just of a man, but of a symbol. Fakhrizadeh was more than a scientist. He was the embodiment of resistance, of national pride, of Iran's dream of self-reliant defense. But the question remains, was it Mossad? Or was there more to the story? Some intelligence insiders believe the hit was too clean, too precise to be done alone. Could the CIA have had a hand in it? Or British intelligence? Or even dissident Iranian groups? Others suggest a deeper twist, that elements within Iran's own regime may have wanted Fakhrizadeh gone. Internal rivalries, fear of provoking war, or the desire to reshape Iran's nuclear strategy. Because in the world of espionage, truth is never simple. Every fact hides a motive, every witness may be a liar, and every ally could be a traitor. So as the dust settled over Abzard, one thing became clear: Fakhrizadeh's death was not the end. It was the beginning of a new phase in the silent, relentless war over the future of the Middle East. And now, we have to ask, what will Iran do next? Will it retaliate, striking back in kind, igniting open conflict? Or will it retreat into deeper secrecy, building new labs, recruiting new minds, and continuing its nuclear journey underground? More importantly, was Fakhrizadeh truly the last man standing between peace and a nuclear Iran, or just another pawn in a much larger game? The funeral procession of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh had barely ended when questions exploded across every intelligence agency boardroom from Washington to Tehran. This wasn't just a hit, it was a message, but from who and how? In Tel Aviv, behind layers of biometric doors and surveillance walls, a small group of Mossad operatives gathered around a silent screen. They watched on loop the footage of the ambush. Multiple vehicles, automated gunfire, not a single bullet striking a bystander. It wasn't a drive-by. It was orchestration, precision, almost clinical. And it screamed of a singular style: Israeli intelligence. But there was a problem. No one in the room was claiming credit, at least not officially. Rumors circled about a satellite-controlled machine gun, about facial recognition systems that identified Fakhrizadeh through tinted glass, about a team that vanished into thin air within 60 seconds. Most dismissed it as cinematic fiction, until internal chatter within Iranian cyber units started vanishing from international intercepts. In Tehran, suspicion turned inwards. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei convened a private meeting with IRGC intelligence heads. The question wasn't only who did this, it was who helped them. The streets might chant death to Israel, but inside the intelligence hierarchy, a darker fear simmered: infiltration. Iran's internal purge began within 72 hours. Scientists were questioned. Some disappeared. A senior security officer was found dead in his apartment with no signs of forced entry. It was ruled a suicide. Others weren't so fortunate. Their confessions leaked later as propaganda tools. But among the chaos, a single name kept surfacing in whisper networks: Reza Farhadi, a low-profile systems engineer in his late 30s. Farhadi had access to the Ministry of Defense's encrypted logistics databases. He had no political affiliations, no travel history outside of Iran, no links to opposition movements, but his behavior following the assassination had changed abruptly. He stopped answering calls, missed several days of work. Then, without explanation, he fled to the eastern border, only to vanish completely near the Khyber Pass. CIA field stations in Afghanistan and Pakistan picked up fragmented chatter. There was talk of a ghost courier, someone transporting digital intel ripped from Iran's nuclear infrastructure, someone who might have facilitated not just Fakhrizadeh's location, but the entire mission. For Langley, the implications were to dash fold. If Farhadi was a Mossad informant, then the CIA had been blindsided in its own backyard. But if he wasn't, if this was a rogue American operation, then the breach ran far deeper. A decision was made at the highest level. Find Farhadi.alive. Langley deployed a rare asset from the Special Activities Center, known only as Harris. No last name, no digital footprint, just a man with a reputation, surgical, fluent in Farsi, and trained to disappear. Harris's insertion into Kabul was masked under the pretense of a diplomatic liaison, but the CIA's local network had been eroding for years. Ever since the US withdrawal, Taliban checkpoints dotted every major route. Drones were limited, human intel was patchy at best, and worst of all, rumors swirled that Iranian operatives were already inside Afghanistan, hunting for the same man. By now, Reza Farhadi wasn't just a defector, he was a ghost everyone wanted to catch. Meanwhile, was hiding in the tribal belt between Pakistan and Afghanistan, moving through Pashtun villages under forged identities. He carried with him a small briefcase, always locked, always handcuffed to his wrist. Some said it held encryption keys, others said it was empty, a decoy, a bluff. But then, in a remote village west of Jalalabad, a child found a buried flash drive inside a hollowed-out tree trunk. It contained one file, a scrambled video recording of Fakhrizada's car moments before the strike, overlaid with metadata linking it to surveillance drones. Drones that didn't belong to the Mossad back in Washington. The revelation sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. The serial number traces led not to Israel, but to a covert U.S. black program, a division buried under layers of classification, known only to a handful of high-clearance operatives. Suddenly, the narrative shifted. Had the CIA authorized an assassination on Iranian soil without approval? Or worse, had a rogue element within the agency done so to provoke war? The line between ally and saboteur was now dangerously thin. The search for Farhadi intensified. Multiple teams, Mossad CIA, even private mercenary outfits flooded the eastern Afghan corridor. Locals were paid for information. Drones reappeared. In the skies, it wasn't a hunt anymore. It was a race. In a safe house outside Bagram, Harris received his first confirmed sighting. A grainy image from a market camera showed a man matching Farhadi's description, buying canned food and batteries. Harris moved in under cover of night, but when he reached the hideout, it was already too late. The place had been torched. Inside the ashes, they found a body burnt beyond recognition and a melted briefcase. DNA tests were inconclusive. Fingerprints were gone. But beside the wreckage, tucked behind a stone wall, Harris found something else. A single flash drive marked with the emblem of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. It was a trap. Inside the drive was a Trojan virus that attempted to breach the CIA's internal systems the moment it was connected. This wasn't just evasion, it was warfare. And it meant something even more chilling. Farhadi wasn't running. He was leading them somewhere. Meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, Mossad analysts decoded a separate intercepted signal, a low-frequency transmission sent from the Afghan highlands. Its encryption matched an older Israeli field protocol, but it had been modified, enhanced, as if the sender had studied Mossad tactics and improved them. The director of Mossad, seated in a darkened room with Israel's prime minister, leaned forward with a grim expression. "We didn't train him," he said, "but someone did." And so, the theory emerged. What if Farhadi was neither a defector nor a traitor, but a double agent? Someone embedded by a third party. Someone whose allegiance was not to country or cause, but to the chaos between. A new map unfolded on every analyst's desk. Not of borders or alliances, but of intersecting agendas. American secrecy, Israeli precision, Iranian paranoia, and in the middle, one man, carrying a truth no one wanted exposed. The next phase of the hunt wouldn't just determine Farhadi's fate, it would decide who controlled the narrative of an assassination that never officially happened, and why. Years later, no one, not even governments, dared to ask the one question that still lingered: who really gave the order? Outside the sterile offices of global intelligence agencies, a different war was being waged, a quieter one. A war of signals, taps, whispers in hotel lobbies, and messages buried in the metadata of innocuous emails. And at the center of it all, Mason Fakhrizadeh to the public. A ghost, two spies, the crown jewel, and to those who understood the game, a problem too dangerous to leave unsolved. The Americans had been watching Fakhrizadeh for years, but their hands were tied by diplomatic red tape and a preference for containment. Israel, however, wasn't interested in diplomacy. They had seen the same pattern play out in Iraq and Syria, regimes inching toward nuclear capability, under the radar until it was too late. They weren't going to wait for a mushroom cloud over Tel Aviv, and while the US State Department debated sanctions, Mossad operatives were mapping Fakhrizadeh's every move, studying his habits like a hunter tracks prey. The tipping point came in 2018 when Israel launched Operation House of Cards, a covert mission to steal thousands of Iranian nuclear documents from a warehouse in Tehran. It was a mission so bold it bordered on suicidal, but they pulled it off. Inside those documents was confirmation. Fakhrizadeh wasn't just a nuclear scientist. He was the nucleus of Iran's nuclear ambitions, the man orchestrating Project Ahmad, the suspected weapons program. His name appeared over and over again, sometimes under aliases, sometimes hidden between lines. It was enough for Israel to decide. This man would not live to see another nuclear test. But taking out a high-value target like Fakhrizadeh wasn't simple. He was guarded, elusive, and almost mythical. He changed cars. He changed schedules. He changed locations. He rarely used phones. His movements were tracked by Iran's intelligence service just as much as they were monitored by foreign powers. Killing him would take more than just explosives and courage. It would take ingenuity. Here's where the story turns almost surreal. In 2020, the world was distracted by the pandemic, by politics, by a million other global dramas. But inside a secret Israeli facility, engineers were building something no one had ever used in the field before, a satellite-controlled machine gun mounted to a vehicle equipped with facial recognition AI, capable of being fired remotely with split-second accuracy. It was science fiction brought to life, engineered for one man and one moment. The operation was greenlit by the highest levels of the Israeli government. The timeline was tight. Every minute detail from the positioning of the kill vehicle to the exact deceleration point of Fakhrizadeh's convoy was modeled, rehearsed, refined. Mossad operatives infiltrated Iran months in advance. They brought in the gun in pieces. They brought in explosives, they rented houses, they planted cameras, and then they waited. But here's the twist. Iran wasn't blind. On the weeks leading up to the assassination, the IRGC, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, had issued subtle alerts. Fakhrizadeh's convoy was beefed up. His drivers were rotated, routes were varied. Whispers of an imminent attack swirled through Tehran's underground channels. But the mistake wasn't in the preparation, it was in the assumption. They believed the attack would come the traditional way. Bombs, motorcycles, snipers. They never imagined it would come from a robotic gun hidden inside a pickup truck parked off the road. Watching, listening, calculating. November 27, 2020. Fikr left his villa in Absard, about 70 kilometers east of Tehran. It was a quiet afternoon. He was riding in a Nissan with his wife. Behind him, bodyguards and SUV. As his car slowed near a curve in the road near that seemingly abandoned truck, the gun activated. What happened next took less than 60 seconds. The gun opened fire, first disabling the lead vehicle in the convoy. Fakhrizadeh, startled, stepped out. Whether to inspect or escape is unknown. That's when the gun turned to him, adjusted for trajectory, and fired. Reports differ on how many bullets hit him, but within moments, he collapsed. Here's what stunned Iranian investigators. No attackers were found. No shooters, no operatives in the area, just a burnt-out vehicle with a disassembled weapons system rigged to self-destruct embedded with sensors, cameras, and a satellite link. Iran blamed Israel immediately. Western analysts confirmed Mossad's involvement off the record. But the mystery wasn't who did it. It was how they did it with such precision, without ever setting foot near the trigger. This wasn't just an assassination, it was a message, a demonstration of reach, a showcase of control. But while the West watched with fascination, inside Tehran, rage boiled. The fallout was immediate and violent. Fakhrizadeh wasn't just a scientist, he was a symbol. His death ignited protests, speeches, and calls for vengeance. Murals of him appeared on the streets. He was dubbed the martyr of science. But more than that, his killing deepened the paranoia inside Iran's intelligence community. How deep had Mossad infiltrated? Who had aided them? Who would be next? And yet, beneath the mourning and rhetoric, Iran faced a deeper crisis. Fakhrizadeh's knowledge was unique. He hadn't trained replacements. His designs weren't fully documented. Some say Iran's nuclear ambitions were set back a decade by his death. Others argue they've only become more determined. But one thing is certain, his death marked the end of an era, the beginning of another shadow war. Meanwhile, in Langley, Virginia, the CIA quietly took notes. Not because they mourned Fakhrizadeh, but because they were studying the playbook, the satellite gun, the infiltration timeline, the engineering involved. To some it was a moment of awe, to others, a chilling reminder. No one, no matter how protected, was truly safe anymore. Back in Israel, the mission was never officially acknowledged. No medals, no statements, just silence. But in intelligence circles, it was discussed in whispers. The perfect hit, the phantom gun, the man who never saw it coming. And here's where the story bends again. Some Iranian officials claim Fakhrizadeh wasn't just working on nuclear weapons. They say he was also involved in advanced biological research, even missile guidance systems. If true, the implications are staggering. Was this assassination about more than stopping a bomb? Was it about cutting off multiple programs at the root? And if so, how many other scientists are now being watched, marked, tracked through AI algorithms as they move between labs and lectures? This isn't just the story of one man's death. It's the evolution of assassination in the 21st century. A turning point where war didn't come with soldiers or drones but with code, satellites, and silence. The game has changed, and somewhere, someone else just made the list. The sun rose slowly over the Tehran skyline on November 27, 2020. Fog curled over the streets like a shroud. The city still quiet as if holding its breath. But on the outskirts, in the sleepy village of Absard, something far more sinister than fog was moving into place. For weeks, maybe months, Iranian intelligence had noticed something minor, seemingly irrelevant anomalies. Brief satellite disruptions over certain zones, strange traffic pattern changes near Absard, and unusual chatter on obscure communication channels. Nothing concrete, but enough to raise flags within the IRGC's internal security units. They informed Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, who brushed off the concerns. "They've been after me for years," he told a colleague. "If they haven't succeeded, by now, they never will." What he didn't know, what few in the entire Iranian regime understood, was that this time, the operation had reached a level of sophistication that defied every rule in the book. There would be no direct assault team, no helicopters, no suicide agents. Instead, the plan was surgical, silent, and remotely controlled. On the morning of the assassination, Fakhrizadeh was in his armored black Nissan Tina, accompanied by his wife, a bodyguard in the front seat, and 3 other armed vehicles in his convoy. He was relaxed, chatting with his wife about an upcoming family gathering. She would later recall that he was unusually calm. But ahead of them, at the side of the road, an ordinary-looking pickup truck had been parked since the night before. It sat there alone, its cargo bed covered by a tarp. To anyone passing by, it looked like it belonged to a local construction worker or farmer. But beneath the tarp was something no one expected, a state-of-the-art, Israeli-made, AI-assisted, satellite-controlled machine gun. No human operatives were near the scene, at exactly 2:47 p.m. As the convoy slowed at a designated choke point where the road narrowed, the system activated. From a remote control center hundreds of miles away, possibly in Tel Aviv, or even outside, the Regina command was given. The pickup truck's tarp fluttered open, revealing a mounted weapon connected to facial recognition technology. It identified Fakhrizadeh in the front seat and began firing with surgical precision. Not a single bullet hit his wife. Not a single bullet hit the driver. Every shot was focused on the passenger, the nuclear mastermind. In just under a minute, the car was riddled with high-caliber rounds. Fakhrizadeh's bodyguard leaped from the vehicle, firing wildly. But there was nothing to shoot at. The weapon self-destructed seconds later, the entire vehicle exploding into flames, erasing any physical trace of the mechanism. Panic erupted. IRGC agents swarmed the scene. But there was no attacker, no assailant to chase. Just smoke, blood, and a single, unmistakable message. We can reach you anywhere. Back in Tel Aviv, a small group of Mossad officials watched the live satellite feed. When the target went cold, a single word was uttered by the operations architect. Done. Fakhrizadeh was pronounced dead hours later. The world reeled that the Iranian government responded with fury and confusion. Zionist operatives, they claimed. American collusion, they accused. But there was no proof. Not a fingerprint, not a traceable bullet casing. For the first time in decades, an assassination had been executed entirely without boots on the ground. The Iranian military's intelligence division was humiliated. Months of surveillance and counter-surveillance had failed to detect a ghost. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei vowed revenge. But against whom? Whispers circulated through Tehran. Was there a mole? Had someone in Fakhrizadeh's inner circle been compromised? Some suggested his convoy's movements had been leaked. Others believed the Mossad had intercepted Iranian military communications in real time, adjusting the hit accordingly. One particularly chilling theory came from an ex-CIA analyst now living in Europe. She proposed that the AI weapon was equipped with real-time biometric sensors, able to track heartbeat signatures and confirm the target's identity through vibrations in the steering wheel. If true, it was beyond anything seen before in asymmetric warfare. Western media reported the event with a mix of awe and alarm. For Israel's enemies, the message was deafening. Borders meant nothing. Time zones were irrelevant. Technology had shifted the rules of the game entirely. You didn't need spies planted on foreign soil anymore. Just a few satellites, an AI, and a will of steel. Within Mossad's inner circle, the operation was referred to only by a code name, Operation Shadow Harvest, and it hadn't been easy to approve. In fact, internal debates had raged for months. Should Israel risk such an open technological play, revealing capabilities that could trigger an arms race? Should they carry out an assassination with such public visibility? But ultimately, the decision was made driven by one core fear: was too close to completing a warhead. They couldn't wait any longer. But here's where things take a darker turn. A year after the assassination, rumors surfaced that Operation Shadow Harvest had been just one phase in a broader campaign, one that hadn't ended with Fakhrizadeh's death. Several mid-level nuclear technicians vanished. Others defected to the West under mysterious circumstances, and 2 IRGC cyber engineers were found dead in separate accidents. These were not coincidences. One Mossad defector, speaking under anonymity to a German journalist, claimed there was a second list. After Mossad, it wasn't just about killing. It was about dismantling the entire apparatus, piece by piece. Iran, meanwhile, tightened its security measures, cracking down on internal leaks and foreign communications. But the paranoia only grew. Accusations flew, careers were destroyed, and trust within the intelligence community crumbled. At one point, Fakhrizadeh's eldest son, a junior scientist himself, was detained briefly for questioning. It was never officially confirmed, but many believe the regime feared even family couldn't be trusted, and yet, the international community largely remained silent. The United Nations issued vague condemnations, Western governments expressed concern, but behind closed doors, many were quietly relieved. One European diplomat admitted, "We didn't have the spine to do it ourselves, but thank God someone did." As for Israel, the operation's success came with a cost. Some within the intelligence community feared they had set a precedent that couldn't be walked back. Once AI-driven remote-controlled assassinations became public, it was only a matter of time before others, China, Russia, Iran, developed their own, and worse. What if this technology fell into the hands of non-state actors? One former Mossad cyber strategist summed it up grimly: "We opened Pandora's box. And for now, we're the only ones who know how to close it. But not forever." In Iran, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh's portrait now hangs alongside the martyrs of the revolution. Streets bear his name. School children are taught his legacy. But the truth of his final day, the clinical precision, the cold detachment, the terrifying technological leap remains too painful to be discussed publicly. It wasn't just an assassination. It was a warning shot from the future, and the future was already here. As the weeks passed after the assassination of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, Tehran descended into a storm of conflicting narratives. On Iranian state media, he was hailed as a martyr, the father of Iran's nuclear defense. They said, a hero, who defied the Zionist conspiracy until his last breath. Funerals were held, fists were raised, and chants of revenge echoed in the halls of parliament. But behind the scenes, confusion and fear rippled through the upper ranks of the regime. No one really knew how deep the breach had been, nor how much the enemy still knew. The official version of the attack was full of inconsistencies. First, it was reported that gunmen ambushed his convoy. Then, officials claimed a remote machine gun mounted on a Nissan had done the job, operated via satellite. Later, even more bizarre theories emerged: that artificial intelligence had guided the weapon, that facial recognition had prevented collateral damage, that the entire operation had been conducted without a single Israeli operative setting foot on Iranian soil. But none of it answered the question that haunted every intelligence officer in Tehran. How did Mossad know exactly where Fakhrizadeh would be, and when? Iranian counterintelligence swept through universities, government ministries, and military facilities. Dozens were arrested. Some were scientists, some were drivers, some were guards. All were interrogated, a few disappeared. Yet no smoking gun emerged, no confession that pointed clearly to Mossad or any foreign agency. The paranoia became suffocating. Trusted colleagues began to suspect each other. Projects were delayed. Security clearance levels were elevated. But the damage was already done. In Tel Aviv, a different kind of silence reigned. Israel refused to comment. The prime minister offered only a vague statement: "Our enemies know we will do whatever is necessary to defend ourselves." There was no celebration, no footage of operatives returning home, no leaked audio of congratulatory calls. But within the Mossad, quiet satisfaction radiated through the halls. The mission had succeeded, not just in eliminating a key threat, but in sending a message: we can reach you, wherever you are. Yet not everyone within Israel's security apparatus celebrated. Some believed the assassination had gone too far, that it risked dragging Israel into a full-scale war with Iran. Others feared it would only hasten Tehran's nuclear ambitions rather than stop them. And then, there were those who questioned the morality of it all. A former Mossad operative, speaking anonymously years later, would reflect, "We stopped a bomb. Maybe. But did we start something worse?" Meanwhile, in Washington, the situation became a diplomatic headache. The U.S. had just entered a period of transition. President Trump was on his way out. President-elect Biden was preparing to restore negotiations with Iran. The assassination came at the worst possible time. American intelligence agencies quickly denied involvement, but privately, they were alarmed. The operation had blindsided them. It raised a chilling possibility. Was Mossad now operating independently of American coordination? Had the alliance shifted? Iran, for its part, vowed revenge. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei issued a stern warning: "We will respond in time and place of our choosing." But that time never came, at least not publicly. There were cyber attacks, mysterious fires at Israeli-linked facilities, drones launched from proxies in Syria and Lebanon, but nothing that matched the scale or precision of the Fakhrizadeh strike. Perhaps Iran feared escalation. Perhaps they were still hunting the moles. Or perhaps they still had no idea how it had all happened. Then, quietly, new whispers began to surface. A former Iranian intelligence officer, now in exile, told European media that Fakhrizadeh's own inner circle had been compromised months before his death. According to him, a female scientist working closely with the project had been recruited through a string of fake academic conferences, lured into meetings in Vienna, and eventually flipped. She had access to routes, schedules, personal routines. She fed everything to Mossad without ever meeting an Israeli face-to-face. But her identity was never confirmed, and soon after the interview, the former officer vanished. Still, Western journalists and intelligence analysts began piecing together fragments from various sources. A pattern emerged resembling a mosaic more than a photograph. They discovered that Israeli operatives had established a series of front companies near the city of Ebsard months before the assassination. Locals reported strange construction, crews, security cameras on telephone poles, unusual nighttime activity. No one suspected a thing. Then, just weeks before the hit, the crews vanished. Was the machine gun truly remote? Did artificial intelligence really play a role? Or was it all part of a deliberate smokescreen to hide the human assets involved? One theory held that the entire story about the AI weapon was planted by Mossad itself. A classic trick: confuse the enemy with science fiction, so the human trail goes cold. It worked. But there was one final twist. In late 2022, leaked documents from Iranian cyber surveillance units revealed something shocking. Months before the assassination, an unknown foreign cyber entity had penetrated the communications of Iran's nuclear defense units. The breach had gone undetected. It allowed real-time access to internal movement logs, including Fakhrizadeh's travel plans. Analysts dubbed it Operation Mirage. It fit perfectly with the timeline. If true, it meant Mossad didn't need a spy in the car or eyes on the road. They were inside the system, watching, listening, planning, every step of the way. Yet the Israeli government still refuses to confirm or deny any of it. As years passed, the story of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh faded from the headlines. Other global crises took over. New wars began. Alliances shifted. But in the shadows of Tehran's nuclear bunkers, his ghost remains. Not just as a symbol of martyrdom, but as a chilling reminder: no one is truly untouchable. For young Iranian scientists entering the military sector today, the name Fakhrizadeh is both a warning and a myth. Some see him as a hero who dared to build a shield against foreign domination. Others see him as a man used by the state, discarded in a global chess game. And a few cautiously wonder if perhaps the truth was never about bombs or national pride. Perhaps the real story was about power, paranoia, and the silent war waged by shadows. Because in the end, the question remains unanswered. Who really killed Mohsen Fakhrizadeh? Was it Mossad? Almost certainly. But was it only Mossad? Did someone inside Iran open the door? Did Western allies assist more directly than they admit? Was it a cyber operation disguised as a drone strike, disguised as an assassination? Or was the whole thing something else? Entirely an operation so intricate, so deeply buried beneath disinformation, that even those who planned it have lost sight of the full picture. One thing is certain: Fakhrizadeh's death changed the game. Nuclear program became more secretive, more compartmentalized, and some saw more determined. Israel's intelligence operations grew bolder. The region, already tense, edged closer to the brink. And the shadow war between these two nations continued in unacknowledged, but always just beneath the surface. So the next time a scientist disappears, the next time a facility explodes under mysterious circumstances, the next time no one takes credit, and yet the world understands what happened, you'll remember this story, and you'll wonder, was this just the beginning?